Well, these are two separate questions altogether. One is about the tariffs, the US-Bangladesh trade deal, and the other is about the elections. And both of them, yes, you're quite right, involve Dr. Muhammad Yunus totally, because he has been the chief advisor of the interim regime for the last 18 months. But then also we must recall that actually when the events of July, August 2024 took place, we have to recall that this was not a spontaneous student uprising. It was touted as such, that it was a spontaneous student uprising that brought down Sheikh Hasina, but we know that it was a meticulously designed regime change operation. And this aspect of it being a regime change operation was actually clarified by Yunus himself, because speaking in New York in September 2024, he said, don't think it happened just like that. He was speaking at the Clinton Global Initiative. He said, don't think it happened just like that. It was meticulously designed. And he introduced the mastermind, who was Mahfouz Alam, a known member of the Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is a banned Islamist organization, and who was at that time special assistant to Yunus, and then later on became an advisor, a minister in the regime. So the fact of the matter is that ever since that time, the Jamaat-e-Islami has been in charge in Bangladesh. They have been really the power behind the throne. They have been, Yunus is their spokesperson in many ways. He just does what they tell him to do. And it is the Jamaat-e-Islami and the Islamists who are really been controlling the regime in Bangladesh. Now, the thing is, we know that the Jamaat-e-Islami was the fulcrum of the entire regime change operation, with Pakistan as the main force behind them, and behind Pakistan were the Western powers. So now we have to answer any question, look at it in the context of what Pakistan and the Western powers have been doing in Bangladesh for the last 18 months. And certainly there's been a huge rise in Islamic fundamentalism. The first thing that the regime did at that time was to release all these terrorists who had been put in jail by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and to just go to the jail and insist that they be released, and that was done. So this was a clear indication what the philosophy of the new regime in Bangladesh was. And over the last 18 months, you've seen consistent examples of the Islamist organizations getting the upper hand. So, Muhammad Yunus tried his best to ruin the very well put together trade and economic cooperation between India and Bangladesh. This was a mutually beneficial win-win situation. The Bangladesh exporters were allowed special privileges to send their goods through Indian airports, and the Bangladesh exporters also got from India the best raw materials, cotton yarn, man-made fiber, textile machinery, at very reasonable prices, the best in the world, and also very quickly, within a few days. But when Muhammad Yunus tried to disrupt it, then they have to go further away for getting their raw materials, maybe Brazil, maybe Pakistan, maybe USA. It took them much longer. The prices were much higher. Transportation costs were much higher. So the economy of Bangladesh was severely affected in the last 18 months, a severe downturn from a growth rate of 6.5%, 7% under Sheikh Hasina. It has come down to less than half, very high inflation, factories are closing, joblessness, unemployment is very high, and in general, there's a great deal of dissatisfaction. So under these circumstances, it was very important for Yunus to prove that he could get this trade deal through with America. And we know that in the beginning, when President Trump had his big, beautiful trade bill adopted, that time the tariff on Bangladesh was 37%. Then they brought it down to 35%. And then after a great deal of bargaining, now there's also a non-disclosure agreement between Bangladesh and USA. So it's difficult to know exactly what Bangladesh has given in on. And the quid pro quo is also a matter of speculation, since there is no announcement about it. But with all this quid pro quo, the tariff for Bangladesh was brought down to 20%. But then when India got 18% in recently, then Bangladesh, rushed their NSA, Khalilur Rahman rushed the USA, and they were busy negotiating even a further reduction, and now they have got 19%. Now this is difficult for Bangladesh, because only if they import raw materials from USA, then they will get zero tariff on that amount of product. But otherwise, they have to pay 19%. I think this is a great opportunity for Indian ready-made garments industry. We must strengthen our. Why should we send raw materials to Bangladesh? We should use them in India for manufacturing, for make in India, and we should strengthen our raw material, our ready-made garments exports. We now have very good FTAs, even with between India and the European Union, India and UK, India and Oman. So many that we have where our ready-made garments will now get preferential treatment in terms of tariffs, and we can certainly increase our exports. But of course, on Bangladesh, I think that they are in a bit of a bind now. And I think that the quid pro quo, there's talk that the quid pro quo may have included, these monazite sands of Cox's Bazar beach, which is the longest in the world, giving the rights for that to an American company, maybe processing these sands on St. Martin's Island, maybe petroleum oil exploration blocks in the Bay of Bengal for American companies. All these are being talked about. It is early days. But certainly, I think that Muhammad Yunus was not able to get something that he wanted to tell his people on the eve of the election, that this is what he's got. So I think that is certainly a point on which Muhammad Yunus has not been able to deliver. But otherwise, on the elections, your question on the elections, I think the role of Yunus, the potential future role of Yunus, is a critical question in these elections. Yunus has also pushed through a referendum on something called the July National Charter of 2025. When the Jamaat-e-Islami backed Yunus regime came to power, they immediately wanted to go into reforms. They wanted to go into reforms of the constitution, reforms of the bureaucracy, of the judiciary, of the police, and they even originally said that our reforms will take 4 years and only then we'll have elections. Of course, there was great pushback from the people of Bangladesh, from the political parties of Bangladesh, because this regime, Yunus regime, is an unconstitutional, illegal regime. They were sworn in on a constitution which had no provision for an interim regime. And even now that the Bangladesh Supreme Court has put back the caretaker regime in the constitution, the interim regime is only supposed to stay for 90 days and is supposed to be chosen, the chief is supposed to be chosen in keeping with certain laid down regulations, like maybe the immediate past chief justice and so on, and is also supposed to do nothing except law and order and make sure the elections are free, fair, and participatory. Now, Yunus regime has done nothing of any of these things. They have stayed way beyond the 90 days. The regime is supposed to be non-political, apolitical, no political parties in it. But all the Islamist parties are in the regime. They are holding advisors posts, the Islami Andolan Bangladesh and so on. I just spoke to you about Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is a banned organization. So I think that they have violated every tenet of the regime of the constitution of Bangladesh. The referendum is not in the constitution. They're not allowed to hold a referendum. But Yunus is pushing it through, and he's attaching the highest importance to this referendum. And he today even exhorted his people, saying, you must vote yes in the referendum. He's been telling his bureaucracy and judiciary that all of you must ensure yes vote. So much so that the election commission, hauled up the Yunus regime and said, you are not supposed to give such instructions. So the critical factor in the referendum is, A, it is unconstitutional. B, the referendum ballots have no numbering. So it's completely, up to the regime to print as many as they want. There'll be no numbering, to stamp as many as they want. So it is almost a foregone conclusion that there will be a yes vote in the referendum. And that will bring in, because the yes vote is on very complex constitutional questions, like a presidential form of government, giving more powers to the president, and the constitution, changing the constitution. They want to downgrade the importance of the liberation war. They want to bring in other factors. So, I think all these issues are going to make it very, very difficult. And the talk in Bangladesh is that Yunus wants to be the president. He wants to be the first president with these enhanced powers. And that is why he's giving so much importance to the referendum and making sure that he wants a yes vote, which he's going to get in any way because the ballot papers are not even numbered. And so then that will bring in the difficulties in the post-election period. In the election itself, there are so many poll surveys and so on, there is basically the Awami League has been left out. So that itself makes the election non-credible because you cannot have democratic elections where the single largest party, which has got at least 25% of the vote in every election it has taken part in, their vote share is normally ranges between 35 to 40%. And you just decided not to let this party take part. On what basis? Absolutely with no logic behind it, because you can't just prevent a party from taking part. It is completely unconstitutional. Everybody recognizes it to be unconstitutional. And so this is one big factor that is going to make the elections non-credible and then maybe even non-acceptable. But among the parties who are taking part, there is the Jamaat-e-Islami coalition of 11 parties, and there is the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party coalition of a few parties, and they are, seeing who will get more votes. Certainly, the Jamaat-e-Islami, as the power behind the throne in Bangladesh, has had great advantages, and they have been able to, they are being accused by the Bangladesh social media of indulging in strong vote engineering, of getting a lot of votes, printing additional ballot papers, additional voters list. Somebody has a family of 4 and is expecting 4 voter slips and gets 41 voter slips. All that is happening in a great way. So let us see in the final vote which of these coalitions come on. But in my estimate, it's going to be what they describe as a national consensus government, where both the Jamaat-e-Islami coalition and the BNP coalition will be brought together in one regime, maybe with Yunus as president, maybe even with Tariq Rahman as prime minister, but the deputy prime minister will be the Amir of Jamaat-e-Islami. So you'll have, something that where the Islamist forces will certainly have the upper hand. I think the Awami League cannot be written off. I think the Awami League is, as I said, about 35-40% of the popular vote at all times. And they have a very dynamic cadre-based organization. There are only 2 cadre-based organizations in Bangladesh. One is the Jamaat-e-Islami and the other is the Awami League. And the Jamaat-e-Islami has never got more than 12% of the vote. 12.2% in one election. The other was always less than 10%, 5%, 6%, 4%, and so on. So the Jamaat-e-Islami is a cadre-based organization. They're trying to leverage that. And I think it was the Jamaat-e-Islami that had benefited the most from the banning of the activities of the Awami League. In fact, not only the activities have been banned, so many Awami League people have been thrown into jail, sometimes on murder charges. And for 18 months, there is no checking of no FIR, no court case, no charges filed, and no bail given. And we've also seen that, the strong killings of the minority communities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Sufis, and the Ahmadiyyas. So this has been another, showing that this is an Islamist grouping that wants the minority to just disappear, as they have disappeared in Pakistan. The pressure of Pakistan is very strong in Bangladesh today. They're trying to recreate the pre-1971 situation. And certainly, as far as Pakistan is concerned, they would like to see the Awami League just disappear, just melt away or something. But I think that the people of Bangladesh really value the liberation war, the system of the liberation war, the values it represented, democracy, nationalism, secularism, socialism, social justice. These were the pillars of the 1972. These are the pillars of the 1972 constitution. And these are just the same pillars that the Yunus regime wants to remove. And their complex set of questions in the referendum are actually related to this. So I think that the people of Bangladesh, even the youngsters who may not have been alive when the liberation war took place, but they know, they're proud that, the people of Bangladesh fought the liberation war. Many of their parents or grandparents were freedom fighters. And so the legend is very much alive. The reality of the liberation war and what it represented is an inextricable part of Bangladesh's identity. Recently, Muhammad Yunus tried to, in the beginning, he tried to appear very liberal, and he said, I'm going to have music teachers and singing teachers and dance teachers in every school, college, and university, and also PT, physical training. But then, under pressure from the Jamaat-e-Islami, he reversed that decision. And he said, no, I'm not going to have that. I cancel that order, and I'm going to have religious teachers. The universities of Bangladesh, the students just erupted. They came on the streets. They said, look, for us, culture and religion are two sides of the same coin. They are inextricable. They are together. Our religion is important and our culture is important, our language, our literature. So, this is a very important aspect of what the people of Bangladesh cherish and value. And that is why I think the Awami League is not going to go away. Their people are there. The value systems are there. The university students have shown that they treasure those value systems. And let's see what happens after the elections. One is the minority communities. One group is the minority communities, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Sufis, and the Ahmadiyas. These number about 2 crores. It's a very, very large number. You just cannot wish them away. They are there. Some of them are doing very well. Some of them are landowners. A large proportion, a significant proportion of the land belongs to the minority communities. There's some people living in the Chittagong hill tracts. So there are a very, very large number of these minority communities, and their rights are important. It is a travesty. It is a really, I would say, a hypocritical travesty that the Western countries who value human rights, who value media freedom, who talk about democracy, who talk about participatory elections, they have kept quiet. All this time they've kept quiet. They just silently encouraged Muhammad Yunus, and they've silently let him do whatever he wanted to do. So I think that this is something that is not going to last forever, something that the Western countries will have to very much accept their responsibility for the terrible situation in Bangladesh today. There also are a very large number of Indians working in Bangladesh. They're working in the various factories. They are executive in the ready-made garment factories. They are investors in Bangladesh. We have, the Adani power plant, which supplies power there. We have the India-Bangladesh Friendship Power Plant, which is in Ramphal. So all these projects are there, and there are a lot of people involved in that. But the Bangladesh regime under Muhammad Yunus has steadily cut down on that, steadily cut down on India's involvement in the Bangladesh economy. They have not honored many of the earlier programs and commitments that were going on. And we've seen that, for example, there was supposed to be an Indian Special Economic Zone in Mirsarai in Chittagong. It's now going to be a drone factory for China. China is going to come and set up the drone factory here. So, all these issues are happening, and the Bangladesh economy, they think they can go ahead, because I remember the Turkish delegation who came to Bangladesh maybe a year ago and tells Muhammad Yunus, we will send you everything that India is giving you. So Bangladesh is busy trying to find replacements. But I don't think that this is going to work, because we've seen the terrible state the Bangladesh economy has brought itself into in the last 18 months. Nobody sees an early revival of the economy. As I told you, even with the Bangladesh-US trade deal, if they're going to buy raw materials from America, the transport costs are going to be so huge that it's just not competitive. So all these aspects are there, and I think that facing up to what the reality of what the Bangladesh economy has become is going to be a rude shock. I mean, for example, one of the commitments Bangladesh is said to have given to America, that purchasing a large number of Boeing jets, maybe 25 Boeing jets. Where is Bangladesh going to get the money from? Are they going to go again to the IMF for another loan? Where is it? Where are they going to get it from? Are they going to go to Saudi Arabia? So all these questions are there, and how it works out is something that we have to carefully watch. The relationship that India and Bangladesh had built up, and I think the important point to remember for Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is that she decided to respect India's security red lines. That she said that she would respect India's security red lines. And so the previous 5 years, I remember Sheikh Hasina came to power in 2009, and she was there for the next 15 years. But the previous 5 years, when Khaleda Zia was Prime Minister, we saw that the regime, the Khaleda Zia regime, the Jamaat-e-Islami regime, very close to Pakistan, they were supporting all the Indian terrorist groups in Northeast India. It was a huge security problem for India. But that completely ended when Sheikh Hasina became Prime Minister in 2009 and decided to respect India's security red lines. So after that, the Indian the Indian economy and the Bangladesh economy, they achieved really unprecedented heights in mutually beneficial trade, economic, and connectivity cooperation, which benefited both countries enormously. India could send its goods across from Northeast India. Bangladesh could get goods from India at the cheapest possible price. India had opened up its own markets and given virtually carte blanche, a free FTA kind of situation where all goods from Bangladesh could enter the Indian market without any difficulty whatsoever. And it was really beneficial. Now, when they have tried to replace India, it hasn't worked at all. And I do not see anything coming in the next few months or years that will change the situation. Whether they think it will change, that's something that, but it still is a remarkable fall for an economy that was doing so well, that had very proudly graduated out of the least developed country grouping and was going to take its place as a middle income country. But look at this, they've just slid back into the LDC category, and let's see how they get out of this one.